So first, I would like to pass this off to Kat to talk about the North Yuba Forest Partnership Draft EIS. Kat, do you have any updates with this document?
The only update I have is that it will be published on November 18th. So it was supposed to be published today, but there is a bit of a delay. So when I say published, I think that means generally available to the public. I am actually not sure, but that's what it sounds like. So I think the plan over the next couple of weeks until the 18th is to get out press releases and get out the information to everyone so that they can access those documents on the 18th, which I think is 2 weeks from today. So that if anyone's looking to read it or make public comment on it, so initiative, and I also focusing in California, but I have here like a quick background timeline, so you have an understanding of the community and the United States as well. In October 2020, the government issues for the territory. In 2021, I signed a report in the United States for the territory. In 2021, the report was developed and they laid down how it is going to be territory. In 2022, it was a president on Build America Beautiful Challenge, which space project and to the territory goal. In 2022, the California Natural Resources Agency with the territory strategy document, similar to the American Beautiful report, it lays out how we're going to achieve that goal. And then in August, we had unprecedented budget allocated to natural resources, very much to meet resolution and territory with almost $1 billion projects, and this focus in addition and it's just also we have a lot more related to natural resources. And in 2022, the AB 278 was passed. More broadly about that. Additionally, that is actually a path goal of 70% lands by 2008. It also made us two other things. One is to add the goal of natural and woodlands and building resilience, that is wildfire, drought, evolution, and other stuff. So you have to kind of leverage the benefits of ecosystems of ag lands in building resilience. And the other commitment was the city conservation as an administration priority. And just like a quick note, I know that I have an accent, so if you have any questions, and I apologize, but miss something. So the two strategy documents based on the resolutions every quarter. The pathways to territory report was this year. They cover 30% of the and the woodlands climate smart strategy. I'm doing them both here. The pathways to territory really focus on territory. The natural woodlands climate smart strategy is really looking at how can we, restore wetlands and improve practices in our ag lands that can help us mitigate a wildfire or build water resilience, for example. I'm going to be focusing on the territory in case you're not familiar, you might have. This is also an important initiative for me. So one of the things that I have to clarify is territory is not much, just being like, oh, we need to get to 30% of lands conserved and water. There is a very strong focus on the quality of existing areas. And with that, the pathway to territory lay out how we're going to reach that goal. And it is how big has from the based on that they find ways to conserve areas. So we have 4% of the lands conserved. And to reach the 30% goal, that means we need to have an additional 6 million acres of land, which is a lot. But again, it's not much about just reaching a number or like conserved, just conserved area. There is like other focus that pathways highlight and guide regional conservation, so regional plans, enhance conservation of existing public lands. So it's improving management or making more conserved, strengthening the status of it, execute strategic land acquisitions, and then acceleration and long-term stewardship. So there is a big focus on the territory to restoration, which I think it's relevant in Sierra Nevada. And then again, like that, it's not just reaching a number. The pathways document identify 3 key goals for the territory: to protect and restore biodiversity, improve access to nature, and build resilience to climate change. It also has like how the territory can support California commitments to strengthen tribal partnerships, advance diversity and inclusion, and then sustain economic clean energy and food supply. One resource that was also released together with the pathways to territory, and if you're interested, I suggest you checking out, is visit the California Nature website. It's California CNRA put together for the 30 by 30s, where they release all updates, budget, opportunities to understand progress. Within that website, they created a very interesting mapping tool. So they put a lot of effort of collecting data sets. And I know that there's so many initiatives putting amazing mapping tools out there. The California Nature, they do have a focus on biodiversity, economic resilience, and access. So it's just like they went to different entities, agencies, put together data sets from all these different resources sources in one place. We can overlay layers and start mapping to help identify, for example, critical areas for biodiversity, for building climate resilience, and hopefully then support prioritizing funding projects or which areas are extremely important to be preserved within the initiative. So like the map today, I have that here on the top right, it is related to biodiversity richness, and it uses the Sierra Nevada region. As you can see, the Yuba watershed, for example, has like high biodiversity richness. However, the like slight difference is what Sierra considers areas within the territory. You don't have the areas rather than so like it's unfriendly to area for the area. This is what having areas. So any different terms has to requires annual reporting California's progress to 30 by 30, and that's a big win because it also ensures that the 30 by 30 goal will persist even as administration change, and it just helps to solidify, you know, the operational 30 by 30. I'm going to look at it differently a little bit. That was 2022 or 2023 because it has, you know, as you have heard, I think in so many instances, the task force meeting they really highlighted that, but all has been highlighting is like there's unprecedented budget allocated to natural resources resilience. So we had an amazing person, Kim Fino, a big breakdown that I would like to share with you today. So we had 150 billion allocated to 30 efforts for acquisition and restoration, and then additional 118 million for focusing on wildlife corridors. We have 17 million for tribal nature-based solutions. That's a new program, and then a lot of also budget has been allocated for climate smart land that could be 30 by 30 projects. And this is like how can I say? It's separate, so it's like 1.5 billion plus 118, and that goes. And then this like addition that I just presented, we have like another good allocation for water, fire, community resilience, access, and capacity building. I know that a lot of organizations wanted to see more money allocated to fire, but hopefully on the projects of restoration, of for health, and come from other buckets. One of the things, so that is like the overview of the budget, and one of the things we are now working, so together with our partners, we have been the different agencies, so to how we're allocating all budget. The thing of Victor, even though that is able to allocate and move a lot of budget for natural resources and all of these projects, conservation and restoration, it is a new program. So CNRA is very adamant that they do not want to create new existing mechanisms. They want to leverage all the funding mechanisms that is already existing in place, and then allocate those budgets to those funding mechanisms. And they're really positive, right? We do not need to invent the wheel. However, it's a little bit complicated, you know, like where all that was just going. And I know that a couple of people that have the budget and information, we need to support organizations accessing this budget, because if we do not spend this amount, it will be more harder to spend that budget in the next years. I'm going to establish, for example, California Natural Resources Agency. They have budget and they do their grant application. They have respond and grant programs with different timelines and guidelines and requirements, which is a little bit difficult to follow up. But one thing that I'm going to highlight for California Natural Resources Agency is that they have a new and tribal nature solutions and 30. So really like the 70 million is to support tribes with restoring management, land acquisition, and all of that. So they are right now in the process of like developing all the guidelines. They are reaching out to tribes to have California, so that they want input from tribes on how they're going to put that grant and allocate that further. I was just had a meeting with them. They're really looking for projects. They just know that, you know, they have basically talk about like they are like they're projects. They only have nearly 1 billion available for projects. And you have a really simple data. It has single continuous application process. So you apply with the application Word document. You the applicant can go with the at any time for application and after. And applicants do not need to determine which WCB program their project fits best. So I don't know how much you probably already apply for their grants, but you need to like try to read the requirements of all these different programs, all these different timelines requirements of the programs. Like they define based on your pre-application, they will define which program your project best fit, and from which bucket they will like take the budget to fund your project. But they have a lot of funds for nature-based solutions and 30 by 30. They have they were allocated 95 million for CASI and ICR upper water program. When we spoke with them, they're not being like picky of like, oh, we just want this type of projects. We are just looking for this type of. No, they're really wanting to like, we have a lot of money. We want to like learn about your project and see if it fits well. So if you have any projects that you think, forest health, I put here like how is the Wildlife Conservation Board like type of projects. They have strategic land acquisitions, voluntary conservation easements, habitat restoration, connectivity, forest health. So if you have a good project, I would definitely encourage to reach out to them, and we can provide a couple of contacts, but it's on their website as well. And then I want to be careful with the time because I want to like have any questions, but we did that breakdown from the different departments of how much budget they have been allocated for next year, and a little bit of the Department of Fish and Wildlife funding grant programs. So it's a little complicated than the previous one, because you will have to read the different programs, the grant programs. They have their timelines and their requirements. They do have regional offices which they encourage to like reach out, and they will provide you information about the programs and maybe like support you identifying which grant program your project fits best. The CNRA is having the what called Expo with all the funding agencies that will be allocating budget to the projects, and that we will have the Expo on November 10th and 30th. But basically, at Expo, the funding agents, in this case, Department of Fish and Wildlife, will like just talk a little bit about the program, how they are thinking about 30 by 30. If you have a project, what should you do, and this kind of stuff. So it has been very informative, and we had a couple of this Expo with some of the funding agencies. And as you can see here, I'm not going to talk about each of these buckets, but there is, again, a lot of budget allocated to wildlife corridors, to smart lands, to fire management, and drought resilience. The Department of Conservation, they also have multiple grant programs with different timelines, guidelines, and requirements. There will be a 30 by 30 Expo with them on the end of November. They took 30 by 30 to like restore and manage watersheds, fire management, ag conservation easement and land improvements, and a bit more focus on climate smart lands. They have received an interesting grant that is like the 14 million for planning and capacity for climate smart lands and 30 by 30. So all the other buckets that I was talking, it's more about project implementation and planning. More project implementation, but then the Department of Conservation, they got like 14 years to support nonprofit organizations, communities on the ground to build their capacity, being staff or understanding of the 30 by 30 and the climate smart lands. I think we are going, hopefully in the Expo, we will get a little bit more information of how the Department of Conservation is thinking related to 30 by 30. But in some ways, to summarize, as we have talked with some of these funding agencies, 30 by 30 is new, and it was a big win to get so much budget allocated to 30 by 30 and climate smart lands. So now all the funding agencies like, oh, how do we think about that? Do we need to change the wording in the grant process? I don't think none of them are going to be changing the funding programs. They might change a little bit of like the reporting or, you know, yeah. So let me see. And then there is other agencies. I did not put all of that. I just put the main ones that think about you. And then the Conservancy that I'm sure that you are very familiar with their own process. They have different timeline guidelines and requirements. Projects must be developed in collaboration with SNC. And we have SNC area representative and a funding team there is very available to support understanding the opportunities project. They got also some money for 30 by 30 and climate smart lands. And as in the task force, I think they mentioned their new landscape grant pilot program that I thought is very interesting and might be very applicable for larger landscape projects. Okay, so yeah, so I'm not going to answer that. I think it's also that, and I think our research is on the 30 by 30 regional group. So we have 80 organizations participating on that group. Our main intention is to leverage the 30 by 30 initiative. We are part of a state 30 by 30 coalition that has active 30 by 30 regional groups throughout the state. And then we also have like statewide working groups like political strategy group, the steering committee, and the equity committee. You know, we all try to make our voices stronger, coordinate our efforts so that we can advocate for budgets, so that we can advocate for projects, so that we can support, you know, all these 30 by 30 initiative that is happening in smart lands. To be a little bit more specific of like what we do, we meet monthly and we try to like share all of this 30 by 30 information, grant, budget, and opportunities through our emails as well. We have been working on what we call the Sierra Nevada 30 by 30 project list. So it's like with our partners identifying projects that we believe you know, they to California, track information with the Sierra Consortium and so that we can keep you know, talking about our needs and you know, also with the state and regional efforts with the 30 by 30. One of the things that the Sierra Nevada, for example, water boards had up until now always thought about disadvantaged communities.
in their grant programs. However, that would most not include communities throughout the Sierra Nevada. So now we have been working with the term climate vulnerable communities, especially with WCB, so that we just move. It's not just communities are not just vulnerable because of income, but there is like all these complexities that is different for each region. So we try to work with that as well. Let's see.
Awesome. So we are Tendr is our cloud-based planning and monitoring tool to look for cloud-based try our best to build a conversation as opposed to silo iterations, work on these large landscape level problems that are really affecting us all at this point. Here is a gratuitous picture of myself in my Forest Service uniform. The point here is not to talk about my past job in the Forest Service, which was my dream job. I am a filmmaker and I'm really passionate about conservation education. I think the more we can educate our publics about conservation issues, the more support we get. In my role, though, in a decade with the Forest Service, meeting with stakeholders, with partnerships, and in communication, I was kind of saying the same thing at all times for almost 10 years. And a lot of us, as you all know on this call, in this space, we've been screaming at the top of our lungs for a decade now, right? That we really know what we can do. The science is there. The proof is there. There are great example projects all over California now and all over the arid West that fuel treatments and prescribed fire can reduce the risk of high intensity wildfire. It can also make our forests more resilient to drought, right? To insects, to disease, etc. But we've just needed more capacity to increase this phrase we all know, to increase the pace and scale of resilience treatments. I said this ad nauseum. My point of all this education that I attempted to do for so long was to get that capacity. Now, what does capacity actually mean? I think to a lot of people, capacity just meant more funding. For some folks in our agencies or in our NGOs or in our other organizations, we just said, we know what to do. We just need more money to go do it. And that would be what I would consider maybe a typical vertical silo. I think for a lot of us, though, that when we talk about capacity, we don't just mean funding. We also mean the pace and scale of public involvement and public participation to help us meet that goal of increasing the pace and scale of resilience treatments. So this is a picture from from a tour I was on a couple of years ago when I worked for the Tahoe National Forest. And I love this picture because it shows us doing just this, right? I think locally here in the Yuba watershed in Western Nevada County, portions of Placer County, and on the east side of Nevada County as well, and into Yuba County, I think we're doing this. I think we're absolutely increasing the pace and scale with public stakeholder involvement, partnership involvement. In this picture, you see here, there's probably 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 U.S. Forest Service people. We're on National Forest System land, public land, but the rest of this group is all stakeholders. It's all partners. And this is what it takes, right? It takes a village to create resilience. And I just love this picture because I think here in the Yuba watershed, we're really on the cutting edge. And we've bought into this years ago. So we're kind of ahead of folks around the rest of the state. In my job, I talk to people all over the state, all over the Western United States. They're all in various stages of accepting collaboration, of tearing down these vertical silos. And man, it's really nice to talk to this group because we're kind of ahead of the game. And actually, the example that I use when I talk to people all over the state and all over the West is the Yuba watershed, and we'll get to that in a moment. So in my Joe Flannery's definition of increasing that capacity, I'm really talking about breaking down vertical silos to increase that pace and scale of restoration. And we're talking about more people, right? More and more people we see they have their day jobs. Maybe they weren't trained in fire adapted ecology or in fuels management, but they're kind of joining this space. And it's really actually exciting. It's an exciting time that as more people care about resilience, more people are kind of moonlighting as conservationists. And I just absolutely love that. And I'm gonna give us a check mark here in the Yuba watershed, right? We have a lot of people that care a lot and they're very involved. And we have a whole forest network we're talking about today, right? How cool is that? A lot of places don't have what we have. And it really kind of gives me a sense of pride as a Nevada County resident and a resident of this watershed. It also means more partnerships, and not just more partnerships, not just folks that are willing to sit at a meeting, but I mean folks and partnerships and organizations that are willing to roll up their sleeves and do some work and actually have the authority to do so. And again, we have that within our watershed. Perfect example would be Circle. Circle has actual legal agreements with our major forested landowner, the United States Forest Service, here in this watershed to do work. National Forest Foundation has the actual authority to contract for forest treatments on the Tahoe National Forest. Again, a lot of places don't have that. We have both of these in spades here. A lot of involvement and a lot of great partnerships that have authority to actually do some great work. The last thing, though, I think to really kind of fully tear down those vertical silos and really start to build a multi-jurisdictional resilient landscape is a long sentence here. And it is, we really need to start democratizing and standardizing planning methodologies and tools and the access to them. So if we have a great partnership, but that partnership is still reliant upon a single agency's single forester to create a map in a GIS database that is only accessible to that agency person, have we democratized a tool? Have we democratized a standard planning methodology? I think there are still some work we can do here. And if only there was a local example that is actually a shining example across the country where we're starting to do just that. And we have one. And I use this example, and I'm serious. I use this example all over the state and all over the West when I talk to folks. The North Yuba Forest Partnership has really done just that. They've created an open system, an open methodology, and they were starting to develop some tools and some systems to do just that, to kind of put plant that final flag of tearing down vertical silos and really helping to increase the pace and scale of resilience. So what were they doing? Well, first, they made a decision as a group that the pace and scale of landscape disturbances needs a more robust assessment package. And what they rely on, they're relying on scientific models and geospatial database, right? Remotely sensed data. So that's kind of the first step, is taking that first initial plunge to really rely on data and scientific models to assess the landscape. They also came up with a system to how to evaluate all of the landscape features that have societal value. We always struggle, right? We struggle with how do we compare a home that has a true economic value with an aspen stand that has societal value but doesn't have an economic value, right? How can we create this system where we can compare apples to oranges? In the North Yuba Forest Partnership, they did that. They called them SARAs. It's based on the best scientific framework around GTR 315. And this system creates a socio-ecological framework for us to evaluate landscape features that have societal value. So we can make those key trade-offs, those difficult trade-offs later down in our planning process. They also came up with kind of a standardized metric for where to treat on a landscape. They called it restorative return on investment. It's essentially the combination of risk reduction and ecological benefit. And we're all kind of doing this, right? In all of our projects, we're trying to reduce risk. We're trying to do so while also providing ecological benefit. So we're all doing this, but I think the partnership really kind of canonized this by coining this term and really creating a standard metric by how we can view and prioritize our landscape. And last, they utilized at scale a system to further optimize that landscape and prioritize it based upon this RROI metric. Wow, that was a lot just then. And we're going to show you how Land Tendr actually incorporates all of that methodology in the software program. But first, I want to say, were they successful, right? Like, they've started to develop this standardization, this democratic access to the planning methodologies. There was a bunch of folks involved within that planning process. We're very lucky here, by the way, in this watershed that our major landowner, the Tahoe National Forest, kind of sets the tone for collaboration really across the country. And of course, they were successful. First and foremost, they were successful because of the people, right? That partnership, I was part of that partnership for a long time. Great folks from every single organization that signed that MOU, and everybody that's a stakeholder kind of on that outer circle. Great bunch of people. That's truly the reason of their success. Well, we can't copy those people and place them everywhere across the state or even everywhere else in our watershed to build resilience, but we can copy the methodology. We can start to copy the systems they developed. And those systems were successful. And one marker of the success is that over $50 million the North Yuba watershed and the North Yuba Forest Partnership, I should say, has raised for that watershed. And this is important, right? Because if you look to the north in the Feather River watershed, you see the last 5 years, you see 1, 2, 3 major fires that had a lot of high intensity fire behavior. And what we're seeing in the American River now between Caldor and the Mosquito and the Rim and the King Fire years ago, we're starting to see that happening on the American River watershed as well. So we're kind of sandwiched between two areas that have a lot of black on the landscape. I love living here in this green, and I think we can keep living in this green spot as long as we work together, tear down those vertical silos, and work together to create a more resilient landscape. All right, so that's what Land Tendr does, right? I said a moment ago. Land Tendr actually operationalizes all those methodologies and all that great work, that system that was developed in the North Yuba Forest Partnership. It bottles up that magic, at least part of that magic, and allows others to duplicate it elsewhere. Before we get into the software and actually kind of talk about that, let's meet a few of these folks who are on our team, who've developed this software and who really, really care about forest resilience like I do. First, we have folks like Scott Conway. He's our Chief Resilience Officer. He was a subcontractor on the North Yuba Forest Partnership, so obviously he helped develop that methodology. You may know the name Hugh Safford. He runs a lab at UC Davis. He was the chief scientist for the United States Forest Service in the state of California, and a bunch of other folks, applied ecologists, forest ecologists, spatial analysts that have joined our team. The good thing about our team is that we live, we eat, we drink, we sleep landscape resilience. This is all we do. Unfortunately, a lot of folks and agencies, I was one of them. I was trying to build forest resilience. I was also trying to keep the campgrounds running, right? I was also trying to keep 5,000 other tasks. And a lot of us do this as we moonlight in forest resilience, landscape resilience. Our team, fully dedicated, and we have some of the best emerging minds in this space that have joined us. Along with Hugh, folks like Dr. Kevin McGarrigle. We have folks like Ryan Anderson, Dr. Tony Chang, Dr. Derek Young, some folks, Danielle Perot, folks who are just completely way smarter than I am. When they talk, I barely know what they're saying, but they really care. They wake up in the morning and they care about forest resilience. With all those applied ecologists, we've kind of joined forces with these folks who are leaving Silicon Valley to take their superpowers, this software engineering superpower, and put it to good use. And what they're doing is they've built Land Tendr, right? So we have all these great software engineers. So we're kind of this hybrid structure. We call it a mission-locked hybrid between tech and science. And we've created essentially Vibrant Planet, and that's our team. We are mission. What's that? Yes. Oh, I'm getting some talking. Was that a question? Nope. Okay. So we are what I would call a mission-locked hybrid structure. We are a public benefit corporation. We do have a sister nonprofit that kind of houses our data. And the neat thing for me, when I left the public sector and joined Vibrant Planet, by joining a public benefit corporation, I get legal protection. I'm allowed to make decisions based on resilience over profits. So we're not a true, for-profit in that sense. We're a public benefit corporation. We've taken advantage of those new laws that have created public benefit corporation. So that's what we are. I'm going to buzz through a couple more of these. We're a science-based organization because I do want to get to a little bit of the software and dabble in that a little bit. Before we jump in, let's meet a couple of the folks that are going to be hypothetically using Land Tendr to work together in a collaborative sense. Well, first we have the forestry department. These are actually all pictures of Vibrant Planet employees. I embarrassed the heck out of them. I put them in presentations. We have Forester Scott. Forester Scott cares about recreation, water, carbon. We have County Supervisor's Office, and we have County Supervisor Tori. She cares, of course, about homes, right? Her constituents are calling her. They see what's happening in the watersheds to the north and south of us. They're worried the same thing's going to happen here. They're worried about evacuation routes, utility infrastructure, etc. And then maybe we also have a local biodiversity foundation. We have biologist Joe, and the Biodiversity Foundation really cares about things like spotted owl habitat, aspens and meadows, these high biodiversity areas, maybe Sierra Nevada yellow-legged frog critical habitat. So this new collaborative, they're going to embark on a journey of multi-jurisdictional planning. They have quite the tasks ahead of them, right? They have to create an initial wildfire and forest resilience plan. They have to prioritize treatments within that plan. That's a huge jump, right? It's pretty easy to say, hey, here's a big blob of an area we care about, but here are the actual treatments, and here are the reasons why we've decided to treat here and not here. I've stood in front of a lot of groups of Nevada County people and told them that we're going to treat behind your neighborhood, but not behind your neighborhood. And when you do so, you have to have a great story that makes sense, that's transparent, and that's based on the best science around. So to prioritize treatments within that plan is paramount. And just for the sake of the exercise, let's give them $20 million to spend over 10 years. And that's what the funds that they'll use. I'm not advocating for any way to vote as we vote in these next upcoming weeks here, but I do know there is a Measure V for our Nevada County residents here that could create long-term funding like this. So we actually put a higher number here for a demonstration today. Last thing I'll say before we get into software, kind of the 101 of what is Land Tendr. What are you going to see once we get in there? So Land Tendr is a decision support system. It's not making decisions. In fact, we feel we've built an agnostic system that's based on science that's going to empower you to make your priority decisions. There's a few other tools out there. There's a few other frameworks out there. I encourage you to research them. What you'll probably find is that there's already been decisions that have kind of been made in those tools when they're handed to you at times, or that could happen. Ours is an agnostic system that empowers you to make your own priorities on the landscapes. We truly believe in self-determination. Because of that, we call ourselves a vessel that incorporates data and models. We don't make the data, we don't make the models, but what we do is we allow users to really harness the power of that data and that model to make landscape level assessments and analysis and project prioritizations. We always say we're starting to be a data rich country, but possibly we're trending towards a data analysis poor country. We need tools like Land Tendr that helps us utilize and leverage all this great data, all these great models to really to make fine scale or large scale decisions on the landscape. And that's exactly what it is, right? Land Tendr is a landscape system to address landscape disturbances. Yeah, we can zoom down into an individual polygon, but we really encourage folks to use it for multi-jurisdictional planning. We are the last pocket of green, this little watershed here in the central and northern Sierras. If the U.S. Forest Service and NID and CAL FIRE and Nevada County are all operating in their own silos and doing their own things, we're not going to create resilience. Fire knows no boundaries. Our planning must know no boundaries as well. And I know I'm saying that like 9 times. I'll try and shut up about that at this point. And the last thing I'll say is this. Land Tendr was not designed for any one agency or individual. When you watch my demo, you'll probably be thinking in your head, as I was when I first saw it, that, this is kind of cool. It doesn't work perfectly for me. You're not going to see enough detail today to even really make that decision. I'm going to give a real broad overview. Even if you and I had a follow-up meeting and we continue the conversation, you're going to walk away and say, I give it a B maybe. But the point is that if each organization within a watershed, if each organization and agency within a given landscape all give it a B, well, I give that an A for collaboration. If everyone can actually use it, can get in there and use it and talk to each other and share scenarios and share prioritizations, we get an A for collaboration. And I truly mean that. All right, so we're going to stop there. That was a lot. And I'm now going to jump into the actual software itself. Hit the wrong button there. Let's close this down. And so I'm going to go real fast in the software because we only have about 10 minutes left here. But what I want to make a point again is that this is a very complex system. Things are going to happen really fast in a moment here. It's going to leave you with a lot of questions of what the heck is happening behind the scenes. I want to point this out in the beginning. We have a detailed product guide. It's 142 pages. We pride ourselves on being as little black boxy as possible. We know that Land Tendr can be used in public-facing projects. CEQA and NEPA are literally public disclosure acts. We have to disclose to the public all the parameters that went into our decisions. So we've created this giant product guide, and at any time you can read through this, find out exactly what's happening behind the scenes. You can schedule a meeting with me. We can go as deep of a dive under the hood as you want. We want you to be comfortable with what's happening behind the scenes in land tenure because things do happen fast. All right, here's our landscape. This is what we call our stewardship atlas. This is pretty neat. This is a combination of the Lake Tahoe Basin and the Tahoe National Forest. Everything in the white boundary here, we can plan within. Basically, the data has been aggregated and organized, and really we've built what's called the Stewardship Atlas for us to plan and do resilience planning within this white boundary. So there's some landscape conditions that I'm going to highlight before we start planning, and we're going to start with our disturbances, right? The things that we care about. We have on this landscape embedded into our Stewardship Atlas, we have a fire hazard model. We ran a stochastic fire model. It's intensity times probability. We used minimum travel time in this model. And what's neat about our model, and again, when I say our model, I mean the model that the client essentially chose that we brought into the system. This model uses 97% weather. What it also does, though, is we ignited something like 70,000 fires within this landscape to see how each pixel would burn. But we didn't stop there. We watched how each pixel burned into the next pixel, right? Fire moves across our landscape driven by wind, driven by terrain. And that wind is, the parameters for the wind are captured by weather stations all over this landscape. So this is a pretty detailed fire hazard model. And it really kind of forms the core. As we know, good data in and good data out. We get a lot of questions on what model we use. Could there be a better model? Could I have a different model? We're open to all of those conversations. But what I encourage groups to do, and I encourage it here in this watershed and everybody I talk to, is we see a lot of maps that look like this these days. And this can actually scare the heck out of a lot of people. If we go through a huge exercise and we spend, a year or two building a really robust hazard or risk map, and then we deliver that without any potential solutions, those of us who've been in this space long enough, we might do a disservice to our public. I don't know what you saw, if you guys were tracking what happened in Oregon this year, or the state of Oregon created a super robust, basically hazard map, kind of a risk map, and they released it. And all of a sudden, a ton of people found themselves in very high hazard zones, scared the heck out of them. There was insurance issues going on, and the state of Oregon had to actually withdraw that map. So that's why we bring in a hazard, but at a certain point, as a group, we come to consensus on this is our modeled hazard. Now it's time to go beyond the hazard and start mitigating that. We also have a drought hazard model. The drought is kind of similar. It's based on the probability of a tree killing drought and the intensity of that tree killing drought. So it's kind of neat. We actually modeled drought and fire. Okay, so after our model hazards, well, what can those hazards actually affect? Those can affect things that have societal value. We call them strategic areas, resources, and assets. I mentioned this a moment ago. It's based on GTR 315. Hey, Anne, is it okay if I go to about 11:15 here, if I go like 5 minutes over?
Oh, totally. You're actually scheduled to go to 11:15, so you're
Oh,
all great.
perfect. Perfect. I'm going to keep going. Maybe it'll be 11:18, but I want to kind of get through this to give folks at least a sense. So I appreciate that. So we have our hazards. The hazards can affect the things that we care about. And the things we care about are strategic areas, resources, and assets. I mentioned earlier they've been normalized and relatively appraised to one another. And I can start to see them in the landscape, right? I can see primary structures where folks live, all the folks that are voting for county supervisor Tory in our hypothetical collaboration, things like our utility lines, right? Our transportation, we have our community safety zones, our critical access routes that people are going to use to flee during a wildfire event. We can move on and we have our recreational facilities. And coming down here, we have stuff like our animal species and communities, right? I see that the Sierra Nevada yellow-legged frog occupied habitat that our hypothetical biodiversity foundation cares about, and our plant species community. And the idea here is that our landscapes are just right. There's so many things that we care about. And it's pretty obvious, right? Because if we just cared about only our homes, we would just go out and clear cut the whole forest, and we'd have homes that wouldn't burn, right? But we know we're not going to do that because these landscape provide us drinking water. They store our carbon for us. They provide biodiversity habitat for all these species we care about, and the list goes on and on and on. So we have all these things we care about. In land tenure, behind the scenes, we then expose them to those modeled hazards. Each of these SARAs, strategic areas, resources, and assets, has a unique response function to the hazards, and that's all embedded into the stewardship atlas. So we have value, things we care about. We have a hazard, a fire, and that gives us risk. We have exposed everything, and we've essentially created risk. It's not displayed here, it's displayed behind the scenes. The analogy would be a car, right? You have a car parked in your driveway. That car has a value to it. You got a tree that's kind of leaning, right? And every time the wind blows, there's a hazard that tree might fall. Because there's a hazard, because of the thing that has value, that's risk. That's why we all have car insurance. Essentially, it's the same workflow. So we're going to go way above and beyond hazard and risk. And how we start that is we start by mitigating that risk. It's really important for us, we think, to get to a place where everyone works together to prioritize how we can mitigate these risks to our landscapes. We mitigate these risks, and I'm going to zoom in here to this kind of South Yuba, Middle Yuba corridor by assigning and calculating and mapping potential management. So we actually do this we did this in all of our Forest Service projects. We basically say, hey, we think we're going to go out here and conduct these treatments on the landscape. By doing this, and I'm not going to turn all of these on, by essentially kind of mapping our projected likely management treatments, we can start to measure the avoided loss, essentially the reduction in risk to all the things we care about. We get a lot of questions of how do you come up with this potential management? It's based on a rule set we developed that is based on the best scientific research around by Malcolm North and others. It's based on our own professional experience working in this watershed, based on things like operability, land ownership, terrain. And what we really find is that we always say at the end of the process, we're going to want a professional silviculturist or a forester to go out and verify these potential managements. But we actually use these to measure the reduction in risk. All right, that's the basic. Let's get in and let's actually build a planning area, and let's create a plan real quick in the next couple of minutes here, and then we'll stop. We can draw a planning area anywhere within our stewardship atlas. We can do it that way. I'm going to clear that. I think it's more important sometimes for us to upload shape files. So we're going to upload, let's see here. We're going to upload the Nevada County boundary. And that's right there. You can see Nevada County is actually cut off. Western Nevada County is not currently covered under a landscape deployment. What's kind of neat about this, though, is the Tahoe National Forest has funded land tender across a majority of Nevada County, for example. And what's really neat is that PG&E right now has committed funds to kind of this South Yuba River and Bear River area. They literally are calling it challenge funds, and they wanted me to pass on to you all. We talked to them yesterday that they call it challenge funds because they're challenging other people to come and match them. So Nevada County's, PG&E has basically said they'll contribute a pretty big chunk, almost half of a further landscape deployment down here, which we think is pretty neat because PG&E is starting to also tear down some vertical silos. One other thing we're going to do here is we're going to upload what we call a distinct management area. So we can actually segregate these planning areas 99 different ways. So we can upload or draw all kinds of shape files. What I've just done is I've just uploaded a shape file of all the WUI areas that are within Nevada County that overlaps with this planning area. I'm going to save the planning area, and now I'm ready to start prioritizing my landscape. How do I do that? All right, let's put on our county supervisor hat. If I'm a county supervisor, I'm County Supervisor Tori, and we just heard that what she really cares about are assets and safety, right? So what I'm going to do is I just go over here and I grab my sliders, and right now I'm looking at the entire county area. I can also go in here if I want. I can turn on just the WUI areas. Those turned yellow. I'm going to come back, retoggle on my Nevada County. So I'm kind of looking at this general area. I'm going to grab asset. I'm going to scrub asset over here to maybe a 3. And I'm going to grab safety. I'm going to move safety to maybe a 4. And as we saw a bunch of color changes occur on the landscape. What just happened there? What are all these polygons? These are all likely treatment polygons based on the rules of operability that we just saw. And the different colors are basically indicating to us the different scales of potential restorative return on investment. And as I said a moment ago, that restorative return on investment developed in the North Yuba Forest Partnership is the combination of avoided loss and ecological benefit, meaning the areas in dark blue as compared to the areas in paler blue, the areas in dark blue contain the most potential to reduce risk and benefit and have ecological benefit. Thus, I should probably spend my resources and time treating the areas in dark blue over the areas in light blue, higher potential ROI. And again, this has all been baked into our stewardship atlas, so it's as easy for a county supervisor to just grab a toggle and say, I care about assets at a 3, and I really care about safety as a 4, and I don't care about anything else in my version of the scenario. We're going to jump over to the WUI area. So now I'm going to plan in the WUI area. And in the WUI area, County Supervisor Tori, holy cow, she cares about assets all the way to a 5 and safety all the way to a 5 as well. Okay, we have a lot of blue in the landscape. Hey, Joe, why isn't there any blue right up here? Well, as we all know, there's not many assets right here, kind of in over the Sierra Crest. We're talking Blackview, Baltimore Town, Meadow Lake. This is where I go to play. And I go to play here because I want to get away from all the assets, right? I want to see the beautiful scenery. So that's kind of why there's a big gap right here. Now, to treat all the areas in blue, we've already determined that the areas in blue have the both highest potential for risk reduction and ecological benefit. That's going to take us forever, right? Like this might take us millions and millions of dollars and years and years and years. We don't have that much time. Successfully in this watershed, I really see that organizations and agencies can successfully implement about 5,000 acres of treatment a year. So we're going to say 5,000 acres. And if you recall, we said we had 10 years to spend $20 million. So we're going to put in $2 million a year. So we're going to spend $2 million a year over 10 years, and we're going to see how we can further constrain this landscape. I then hit create scenario. And right now we're calling on that forces algorithm. It's an optimization sequencing code developed by the Rocky Mountain Research Station. It was used in the North Yuba Forest Partnership to come up with their priority areas that are actually going into the EIS that we talked about early in this meeting. Same system. Now it's been operationalized within our software to be used by everyone. Those fancy software engineers we talked about that we always make fun of for historically spying on our conversations. Now we're using their superpowers for good. They've taken this optimization sequencing software. It originally took 30 hours to break down and optimize a landscape like this. They've got it down to about 1.5 minutes. So we're not going to even wait that full 1.5 minutes. I've already built this scenario. County supervisor, it looks like this. After 1.5 minutes, it pops out 10 priority projects actually ordered in the number about which they should proceed. Project 1 has this red one right here, has the most potential risk reduction and combination of ecological benefit. I can actually click on it. I can pull up some information about it. I can see who owns the underlying property. It's all U.S. Forest Service here. I can see how much the project costs. And I can see the likely breakdown of treatments within that project. Looks like we have some manual thinning, some mechanical thinning, and some steep slope thinning. So right away, in a couple minutes here, we just took a giant landscape. We broke it down to County Supervisor Tori's priorities. It spit out 10 sequential projects. We know who owns it. We know what's going to happen and where it's going to happen. We're getting pretty close here to be ready to do environmental analysis. But the best part of the system and why I left my dream job in the Forest Service with a budget and a film crew, and I was making conservation education, is this next moment here. Just as County Supervisor Tori has been building her version of this plan and how to spend $20 million over 10 years, the Open Space District, I call it Open Space District, it's really the Forest Service, they've been doing the same thing. Their projects look a little different. Why? They emphasize different things. They emphasize recreation, carbon, and water. We can actually click down to the Biodiversity Foundation that we met. Their projects look a little bit different still. We see a lot of overlap here in the 20 corridor, but this project's new, this project's new. Why are they new? Why are they a different alternative of the same planning area? Well, that's because the Biodiversity Foundation weighted biodiversity only, meaning they told Land Tendr to create projects that place biodiversity on a greater, have a greater weight than all other strategic areas, resources, and assets. So now we all have access to the same system. We're all playing the same system. And then we can even start to compare those to one another. So I can actually grab the biodiversity scenario alternative, if you will, the county supervisor and the forest services. I can click compare. It's going to pull up this comparison screen, a bunch of widgets and gadgets. I won't get to all of them because I'm running out of time here. But a neat one is we can scroll down. We can actually see the spatial overlay of our consensus. I can turn off maybe non-consensus. I can even turn off majority consensus. And right now I'm looking at complete consensus. No matter who you are in this collaborative, whether you're the Forest Service, whether you're a local county supervisor, or whether you emphasize biodiversity, we can all agree that these areas along Highway 20 should be treated. And we're looking maybe kind of, what is that? Just to the kind of west and north of Bear Valley. We can all agree that these areas should be treated primarily. I can even bring this forward as a scenario. Maybe we bring this forward as our proposed action and we get further key stakeholder agreement. I'm going to turn back on majority consensus. We're going to scroll back up, and up here I have some more metrics that arm our collaborative with more transparency and more collaborative kind of pockets, I would say. We can look at, how much ROI did we get per project, per actual asset, SARA category. A neat one over here is a fancy phrase called object effects over time. What that really means is the reduction in risk over 10 years. I can hover down here and I can see that by doing nothing, that no action scenario, I have a negative 35% value change in assets. Let's actually change this to maybe something we didn't emphasize, like recreation. Nobody emphasized recreation, but Land Tendr is actually tracking the co-effects to all of our other strategic areas, resources, and assets. So when I hover again, after 10 years, I see that no action has a negative 29% effect, meaning that there's going to be a disturbance. Our modeled hazard, that fire is going to occur. Now, I also see negative numbers for everything else. Why is that? Why do I still see negative numbers? That's because we only treated a portion of the landscape. We only treated a portion of the landscape, but we see that all of our action scenarios, all of our action alternatives, if you will, they all do much better than doing nothing for recreation. So again, if I'm a recreationalist and I'm kind of entering as a key stakeholder, whose scenario am I going to like the best? I'm actually probably going to like, the county supervisors or maybe the consensus scenario the best. The last thing I want to show you is we're going to jump back in. We're going to look at the county supervisors scenario one last time, and I'll end here. As I scroll down, the most important metric, and again, one of the reasons I left my awesome public sector job and joined here is this. I see that I've only treated 4% of the planning area, and yet my total ROI, my reduction in risk, and my ecological benefit is almost triple the amount. Not only do we need to tear down vertical silos and all work together in some sort of standardized fashion, we also need to stop chasing easy acres. We've all inadvertently trained our public to evaluate us on the amount of acres treated, not the priority acres. By using Land Tendr or other methodologies like the North Yuba Forest Partnership did, we're making the case that it's not the amount of acres that are treated, it's the priority acres that are treated. And here we see that by, again, treating only 4%, we're almost getting triple the amount of prioritization and value from those treatments. I will stop there with one last message that this all happened very fast. There's no way you're going to be able to believe everything that happened or believe that we totally operationalized and systemized the awesome methodologies developed on the North Yuba Forest Partnership Project. We did. I'm going to put my email in the chat. I would encourage you to reach out and we can do a much slower paced, I'll talk way slower, and a more detailed approach and demonstration. And we can really get you comfortable with the methodologies that are happening behind the scenes in Land Tendr. Thank you so much for your time. Really excited to be here. Like I said, it's fun for me because we use this same landscape for a demonstration all over the country. And it's actually kind of fun to show you guys what we've built here in our own home watershed. Thanks for your time again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Joe. And I know that was a bit of a whirlwind, but we will have the presentation slides available on the Yuba Forest Network website, as well as your contact information. So if people would like to reach out, I'll make sure to include your email. Do we have any questions for either Liz or for Joe? I can start off with actually, Liz, I have a question real quick. So with Circle, I know that we actually work in multiple regions within the 30 by 30 initiative. One of them will be the Sacramento Valley for like a lot of the lower Yuba projects that we work on, and then majority of our projects are going to be in the Sierra Nevada one. Do we submit projects just to the Sierra Nevada, or do we submit them to either region depending on where the project lays?
I would say it depends where the project lays, and if there is like because that is something that we talk this year at the Conservancy, is that the Wildlife Conservation Board, they really love to match projects. So if you're able to get something from Sacramento Valley or the San Joaquin Valley, or or the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, they really like to match those. So I feel that, and they can like fill in gaps, So I feel that you can like discuss that collaboration, even if a project like cross boundaries. I think several organizations will be like interested of matching funding just for like collecting those projects. And then the other activities really also have to collect all the landscapes, the Sierra, the Hills, the Valley.
It's also using selection where if you have organization or that boundary you saw, no, we're going to start using this particular with the hope or use it in your own projects.
I'm very excited. Like, I have no parents here, so I have to settle on. I really love it. And the program, what is the program? The program, farming over, and with project, I want to like for the PDA production. So this year, let's see what 90 and and if he's having or anybody or Thursday, I was able to project. So we have project for the PDA. Make sure you see something like that. I'm getting interest or getting a project or somebody reaching out to my office or you in the office too. Even in Canada.